Now we know how to perform commits when we want to add one file to the repository, or if we want to commit all of our changes at once. But what happens when things aren't that simple? Fortunately for us, Git has a concept called the staging area, where we can control precisely what we want to include in our commit. Let's take a look at how that works. We're back in our really cool project folder. Let's try a new command, git status. This command will, perhaps not surprisingly, show us the current version control status of our project. Right now, the output of this command is kind of boring. It tells us what branch we're on and lets us know that there aren't any changes for us to commit. Why doesn't it tell us about the status of our README file since we added it to the repository? Git status will only show you information about files that have some kind of special status to Git. If a file has already been added to the repository and it hasn't been changed since we last committed to it, then there's nothing special about it as far as Git is concerned. This is a good thing, because otherwise Git status would be really hard to read for larger projects, and this allows you to focus on only the stuff that's important to Git right now. Our project folder is kind of lonely at the moment. We have a README, but how many successful projects only have a README file? I'd guess not very many. Let's add a few more files. Like before, I'll use the touch command to create some files, and we'll just pretend that I've been coding along for a little while. So now we'll run git status again, and voila! We have a more interesting message. It still tells us what branch we're on and that we have nothing to commit, but it also lets us know that we have 3 untracked files. Remember, we have to add new files to the repository before it will start tracking their changes. In fact, you can see that git status has a helpful message reminding us of that. So let's add one of our files and see what changes. Now we have 2 file listings. The old untracked files listing from last time, but we also have a changes to be committed listing. Adding file 1 to the repository moved it to what we call the staging area. You can think of it almost like packing for a trip. Git is gathering everything that you want to commit in one place so that it's ready to go when you run the git commit command. We can move the other files to the staging area by adding them to the repository as well. Then we can run git commit and see that everything in the staging area was automatically committed to the repository. Now we're back to our boring status. Nothing to commit, nothing's unstaged. Let's make some changes to file 1 and file 2. I'm just going to add some simple text here. Feel free to do whatever you want if you're following along. If we run git status again, we can see that we now have a new listing, changes not staged for commit. This is a list of files that have already been added to the repository, so Git already knows that it needs to track them, and it has detected that the files have changed since we last committed. Much like when we were viewing git status before, it has helpful hint messages for us, letting us know how to move these files into the staging area. We have 2 options. We can use git add to add files to the staging area one at a time, or we can use git commit with the A for all flag to just commit everything that's changed, just like we did in the last video. For now, though, let's assume that our changes to file 1 and file 2 belong in separate commits. This happens sometimes. The changes aren't necessarily related to each other, but for whatever reason you end up making them both without doing any commits in between. The staging area makes this easy to fix. First, we'll add file 1 to the staging area. Now we can commit it by itself. If we run git status again after committing, we'll see that File 2 is still in the Not Staged for Commit area, while File 1 is no longer special to get. We can repeat all that and give File 2 its own commit in the repository. The staging area might seem complicated at first, but once you figure out how it works, it's a really powerful tool that gives you detailed control over each of your commits. You might not make use of it often if you're committing your changes frequently, but when you do need to do something more complicated with your commits, it can save you a lot of time and energy. Let's take a look at a few more situations where the staging area comes in handy.